I warmly welcome you and thank you for accepting our invitation to talk about the Stradivarius violins and of course some other topics as well. You have a wonderful Stradivarius instrument, so first of all I would like to ask you to tell the story of your instrument, which was built in 1690, as far as I know, and so therefore it has a very long history. And it was the property of the legendary Hungarian violinist Leopold von Auer, our Lipót as we say in Hungarian, yes. How did you get this instrument, and what is so unique about its sound?
Well, I've been playing this instrument for 24 years now. It's really a long time. It is on loan to me from an organization in Chicago called the Stradivari Society. They basically they act as matchmakers between people who wish to invest and have an instrument like this, and people who can play them. And most of the time, it's not the same person. So I've been very fortunate since 1997 to be a recipient, and it was immediately clear to me that this is not. It's not just another violin. This is something very, very special. Of course, just historically, when you think who owned it, who played on it, who listened to that violin as an example of what is the best way to interpret music. When little Jascha Heifetz was listening to Leopold Auer in the classroom, it's humbling to think about it. To think that the Glazunov concerto was premiered on this violin in the hands of Leopold Auer, where Tchaikovsky was rejected with this violin. You realize that you are carrying a piece of history in the violin case. It's very special.
And what would you say generally about the instruments of Antonio Stradivari? What makes a Stradivarius a Stradivarius? What is the secret?
If I knew the secret, I would maybe find a way to reproduce it. And I think the secret is very simple. It's just genius. And he happened to be one. And what is extraordinary, I think, is that he lived to be 93 years old when life expectancy was 40, 45. He outlived a normal life course twice. Makes me think that maybe he was supposed to be here and sit and make violins. He died cutting wood. He was working until the very last day. There must be something to it. The greatest violin maker, arguably one of two greatest violin makers ever lived, lived 2 human lifetimes. It's interesting.
What kind of care does such an invaluable instrument require?
Well, first of all, common sense. You try not to do something extraordinarily stupid, which sometimes still happens when we are all human beings. But I do feel a great responsibility. The instrument was built in 1690. I started playing it when it was 307 years old. And it is today my duty to make sure that this is, however long I will play on this instrument, that somebody else is playing on it after me, and this person will find it in the same shape, in the same condition as I found it. There is a luthier, a violin maker, who is taking care of this instrument. He's an absolute phenomenal restorer, and this is today it really is a special craft of violin making. These people who are looking after all the instruments and making sure that they are staying healthy. It's almost as to find a great restorer is almost as important as finding a great instrument.
People can find a lot of videos on YouTube about testing different violins. For example, whether can we hear the difference between a $70 violin and a $10 million Stradivarius? What do you think about this?
I don't think about it.
Whether everybody can hear the difference between the cheaper instruments, master violins of today, and the priceless violin by Antonio Stradivari or Guarneri?
I assure you, yes. We say in Russian, one who has ears will hear. No doubt in my mind. And I'm not in a business of selling violins. I don't benefit from it in any way. But if we want to, I mean, we should doubt everything, and it's wonderful to doubt. But there is also, I think, a matter of reasonable doubt. Generations of extraordinary musicians unanimously agreed that the works of Stradivari and Guarneri del Jesuit and Amati brothers truly are levels above everything that was created afterwards. That would mean that I should argue with everybody who thought so before me, and this is basically every great musician who came before my time. I think it's a little bit ridiculous. Yeah, there are certain, and I don't want to sound obnoxious, but there are certain things that are almost objective, and I do think that these instruments are extraordinary additions to music. So I would not encourage such experiments unless one has a lot of free time and doesn't know what to do.
And how easily does a violinist adapt to an instrument which is new for him or her?
It's a process. It's a process. It depends, first of all, on physicality of a person. Your hands, the way you adapt to instruments. It's not a sign of superior technique or lack of technique if you adapt slower. It's really not a. I don't think it's a particular virtue. It can be helpful sometimes for whatever reason. You must quickly take an instrument that you don't know and play. But it takes time. I can tell you that from the time that this violin was lent to me to the point when I could say, we are one. This is now a true part of my body. It took a few years. But I of course played it, and it was a process of learning. And the instrument also adapts to you, because you produce certain vibrations, and wood starts to remember. Wood is a biological material. It remembers just like our muscles remember.
This is what pianists cannot do.
I really do feel for pianists. It's very challenging. I of course play with pianists all the time. Of course they're used to it, to go from city to city, from concert hall to concert hall, and on a spur of the moment adapt to a new instrument. They have experience. We violinists do not.
Yeah.
But it is really very, very challenging.
Speaking of adaptability, you will serve at the concert of the Franz Liszt Chamber Orchestra not only as a soloist, but as a principal guest artist, as a concertmaster. How difficult is to fit in a leading position into an orchestra with his own traditions and own customs, and last but not least, because this is not your first time together with the Franz Liszt Chamber Orchestra, please tell us some thoughts about your relationship with them.
Well, I would not have dared to do it if I did not have a relationship. I do play lead quite often. I enjoy it tremendously. I love playing chamber music, and this is hard. I don't think one can argue. It's just a little bigger formation, but at the end of the day, this is absolutely chamber music making. With a group like Franz Liszt Chamber Orchestra, it is a process of both. Of course, I have to assume the leadership. It's my job for the week. But at the same time, one has to recognize that this is an orchestra that plays without a conductor always. And there is a certain dynamic within the group that is, first of all, there for a reason. And whether I agree with it or do not, it is there, and it's not up to me to change it. I happen to agree. What I see, what I have seen for many years of playing with this orchestra, I've always loved it. So this is, musically speaking, it is in a way very natural. I don't feel unnecessary tension or resistance, so to speak, to my ideas, nor do I feel resistance to ideas that come from the orchestra, which they do. They do play in a certain way. They have a certain kind of sound production which is close to me. And to be honest, if I would be interested to know my colleagues' opinion, how the rehearsal went today, but it didn't feel like this was first time, not at all.
Many thanks for this conversation. It was really inspiring.
My pleasure.